I have been a father for 5 days now, and I am tired. I'm so tired. I I think I've been sleeping in 4 hour chunks, maybe five, a couple times five, right? And here I am complaining. I am getting so much more sleep than my wife, but kind of the trade off there is, I'm shoveling the driveway with the snow. I'm doing the dishes. I'm fixing dinner. And she does stuff too, but she's primarily like feeding the baby and, you know, healing from childbirth. And, and man, it is the best time. I've never been so tired and so happy at the same time. I have never enjoyed something so much. I have never enjoyed someone's company so much who continuously peed on me. Like, last night, I remember, or earlier this morning, I guess I should say, it's about 3 a.m. and he is just screaming, right? Just because he's not used to hiccups or, you know, he yawned and that freaked him out, or I don't know. He's a newborn, so everything scares him. And and everything's new. Of course it scares him. Of course it's new. He hasn't done any of it before. It's so wonderful to stay up with him and change his diapers and feed him bottles and just look at him and just see all the potential that's there. See this life that's in front of him. See this future that he gets to have. That he gets to have these really stable parents that are providing him that future, and to be a part of the building blocks of that future, whatever he decides to make it. It's a gift. It's such an honor to be his dad. Now, I'll really enjoy it when he decides to sleep. We'll call it 5 hours straight at a night. You know, any sort of sleep schedule is long gone at this point, where you're sleeping for 7 hours between 7 and 11, and you wake up and then like you're up having dinner at midnight, and you're changing diapers at 2 or 3, and you're smiling as your son is pooping all over your hands, and you're just happy, like legitimately happy. Like it's the best fucking thing that ever happened to me. And it reminds me, in a lot of ways, it's reminded me of basic combat training. I mean, 19 years ago at this point, but you know, it reminds me of that. And where this event happens, and then you're this new person, and then you have this new mission, and sleep is this thing you get when you can, but nothing is guaranteed, and you just run at a dead sprint, and you really find out what you're made of when you are just living life 4 or 5 hours at a time max. And I know this won't last forever. I know there'll be seasons of things. I know eventually he'll start sleeping more, sleeping through the night. I know eventually he'll start teething and talking and calling me dad, which will be incredible, which I really look forward to. I know right now, here so early in the beginning, it's really important that I just soak all of it in, and just enjoy every moment of it, because there's only so many times you get to hold your kid. There's only so many times you get to change his diaper. There's only so many times you get to burp him. And so I'm going to just love every second of him, all the seconds that I get, every moment the Lord bestows upon us as a gift. I'm going to love it, and I'm going to be thankful for it. because I get to be his dad. I have been a father for 6 days now, and I ran into the first sort of question on, do we allow visitors, right? Who gets to visit? What are the conditions of their visit? That sort of thing. I mean, there's a big, heartwarming, open family that wants to see the boy, but also he's 6 days old. And so while he has an immune system, it's pretty fresh out the box. And you kind of want to give it some time to develop a little bit before you start exposing him to all of the germs in the world, right? Like he doesn't even get his shots till like week 6. I had these questions, these quandaries, these okay, so grandparents want to come over. Do they wear a mask? Right? Everyone got their vaccines. We made sure everyone got their vaccines. We said, if you want to see the kid, get your shots. But then we're like, okay, so it's January, so there's a bunch of like bugs and viruses and colds and flus and all that shit floating around. So do they wear masks too? Right? And that's a conversation me and my wife had at like 4 in the morning in between feedings when neither one of us could sleep. We're trying to figure out what's the best way to do it, but without going overkill, I guess, or what's necessary, or it's a tricky line. You want to make sure you do it right. You want to make sure that you protect them. And I know for me, uh, I have an easier time going scorched earth with boundaries, if I'm doing it to protect myself or the ones I love, right? Like if I'm bumping up against something and that thing doesn't want to respect a boundary, I can go scorched earth. I can be like, no, for no uncertain terms. Like, we will do everything we can to keep people safe, right? And I think a lot of that is left over from the pandemic, which was, get ready, 5 years ago, kids. And a lot of that was left over from being a medic. But thankfully, uh, his grandparents are all about getting their shots. They before we even asked, they're like, "Hey, we got everything. We're good. We got all the shots we need." And so they're coming over, and we're trying to figure out what's the best way to do it. How can they interact with their grandson, but also we keep the grandson safe? And we decided that, uh, you know, if you're gonna hold the baby, you got to wear a mask when you hold the baby because he's 6 days old, and there's 10,000 bugs floating around right now, and everybody's getting sick. But like, if you're not holding the baby, you don't got to wear a mask. That's fine. And I was kind of scared. I was nervous, I'll admit, because I just want to keep him safe, you know. And I've known people that would sacrifice the safety of children for convenience. And I would rather inconvenience the entire world than put him in danger. I have been a father for 7 days now. It began at the trip to the hospital, where it was the weekend of this, you know, worst storm of the season, snowstorm, right? It was early January. And I'm trying to get the house closed down. I'm trying to get everything ready. And as I'm doing that, I'm looking at the weather report and I'm like, oh man, we got to go. Like, we should show up to the hospital several hours early because I'm thinking, we're going to get snowed in somewhere. I want it to be at the hospital because I don't want to deliver my baby because I learned how to do it once 15 years ago in combat medic training. Uh, I'm good. I've got health insurance for a reason, you know. I want a team of nurses and doctors and skilled professionals to where all I have to do is just show up and present a health insurance card. And that's what I did. And it was awesome. And we got to the hospital. a couple hours before the brunt of the storm hit, where like it was just getting bad, and I was like going 10 miles an hour the whole time. And then we get there and we get set up early and it's fine. And she takes this medication like every 4 hours, right? It's to start to get the birthing process going. And so I'm up every 4 hours with her, you know. And then that was just kind of my sleep cycle for days after that. It was just I was up for every 4 hours. And I just kept running, 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 running. And I remember I remember when I met my son, my wife had to have a C-section because, the heads in my family are just so darn big. And so off she went, and then I was there, and then I was holding her hand and just kind of putting my head against hers. And then I heard this screaming, this wonderful, lovely screaming of a beautiful little boy, a very big boy, right? He was almost 10 pounds. But he was, he just screamed the whole time. And I remember they took him uh, and they put him in this warming box, right? Uh, because, he didn't have a vaginal birth. So he was a C-section baby. And then as they're kind of like sewing my wife up, I run directly to the kid, right? I'm looking at him. I'm 4 feet away from my wife or whatever. But I'm staring at the kid and I'm like, what do I do? Like, I think I'm supposed to do something, but I'm honestly not sure what. And, you know, and then one of the technicians said, "Hey dad, hold his hand." And then I did. And he goes, "Yeah, you're the first person to touch him skin to skin, outside of his mom, of course, because his mom grew him." But yeah. And then the running just kept going after that. It was like I was sleeping just enough to recharge the batteries to keep going. I remember after my son was born, he had trouble keeping a high enough glucose level. So he was never admitted to the NICU, but he was under observation for a couple hours. We kept trying to get him to eat, but he was so tiny and so new, and he had trouble. He just wanted to sleep. And I remember when they took him to the NICU, I said, "Hey, can I push, the carriage that has him?" And they said, "Yeah." And I wish I could have taken my wife with me, but I thought, okay, one of his parents needs to go with him, so I gotta go and I gotta shut off all that emotion, right? And then when we get to the NICU, the doctor, she's very kind, and she's like, yeah, she's explaining everything, and she goes, "Oh, we're just gonna observe him, and we're gonna try to feed him, and they're gonna figure out how much baby formula would keep his glucose up, right, to acceptable levels, whatever those were." And I'm sitting there and I'm like, but inside I'm just like fucking like trying to not panic, right? I can feel this panic coming on. And I'm like, don't, nope, you got to hold together, bud. Do not panic. Just deep breaths. And then I came back to my wife, and she was scared and I was scared, and we just held each other and cried, and you know, and then we went up there to visit him, and just kind of hung out for a bit, and came back down to our room and just slept because I thought, oh, well, we got a window to sleep a little bit here. And that only lasted for a couple hours. He was out of the NICU, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 hours later. They just had to figure out, oh, you need to give him more formula, right? Like like X amount of, we were giving him X amount of formula, but he needed like twice that because he's a big kid. And then, yeah, the next day, I took everybody home and we packed up the birthing suite we were in, which is kind of like a hotel. And I got everybody in the car. And by then, it was several days after the storm had passed. And and the main roads were clear, but like our little side street really wasn't. And I remember driving down the road and feeling that moment, the significance of that moment of being a man driving his wife and his newborn son home from the hospital. It was the most important car ride of my life. It was the most important drive I've ever made. I have been a father for 8 days now. And I remember the day she told me we were pregnant with him. It was around my birthday. And I was getting ready to go into the office because I work from home 4 out of 5 days a week. And it was an office day. And she came downstairs with a positive pregnancy test and a book that said, "Dude, you're going to be a dad." And my first response was, "Can you make me a sandwich?" Because I was running late and I didn't have a sandwich for lunch. So I had my pregnant wife making me a sandwich, which was just funny because we'd been trying for years to have a baby. We had done fertility treatments. And this is going to sound stupid. Let's start there. But at one point, we had given up the fertility treatments. We'd taken a break, right? Because the shots were kind of intense for her. And I read an article that said something like oatmeal causes infertility in mammals. No, the pesticide used in oatmeal can cause infertility in mammals. But I was like, son of a bitch. And so I stopped eating oatmeal. And surprise, surprise, 2 months later, she came downstairs with a positive pregnancy test. And now I get to hold this wonderful monkey man in my arms and just watch him explore life and see what all the new things are. Anyway, the pregnancy was a roller coaster. I finished up working through all my unresolved childhood trauma issues, which I won't go into here. And I realized something that's really important is that whatever decisions I make for him need to be what's best for him and not what I wish someone did for me when I was a kid. You know, I can't go back and protect the little kid version of me from things, but I can make sure he's safe. He's not going to have to fight my battles. He won't have to go to my war. He won't have to escape poverty like I did. He'll have his own struggles. His own... Right now, he's struggling on filling a diaper. So, I gotta go. Whew, that's a smell.